US decision on G20 message for ICJ diplomacy test for India. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Thursday that he would not attend the G20 foreign ministers meet at Johannesburg, South Africa, because South Africa is doing very bad things. President Donald Trump has declared that South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. Neither Trump nor Rubio have provided details. So, what has provoked the attack on South Africa? ICJ case against Israel. Rubio's post on X can be understood in the context of South Africa's ongoing genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. As international support for the case has increased, so has the tussle between the South Africa and its allies and Israel and American public figures, such as Republican Senate Lindsey Graham, who have sought to undermine the ICJ. On January 31, South Africa and Malaysia announced a campaign to protect the rulings of the ICJ and the International Criminal Court in the face of alleged attempts by the US Congress to hit the ICC through the use of sanctions. A nine-nation Hague group was formed under South Africa's leadership to defend the right of Palestinians and to coordinate against violations of international law by Israel. The first Trump administration 2017 to 21 imposed sweeping sanctions on the ICC and its officials, a decision that was reversed by the Joe Biden, a decision who supported the ICC investigation into Russian war crimes in Ukraine. However, this support suffered after the ICC said it would seek arrest warrants against the leaders of both Israel and Hamas. Soon after the Trump's re-election, Israel ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, said that the outcome presents an opportunity to neutralize the cases against Israel in the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice. The ICC and ICJ are both international tribunals seated in Hague, Netherlands. The ICC, established pursuant to the Rome Statute of 2002, had the justification to prosecute individuals for serious international crimes such as genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. The ICJ is an organ of the United Nations that hears dispute between states. Rubio's tweet, while aimed more at South Africa, current president of G20, raises questions about the Trump administration's commitment to the multilateral organization itself. The G20 foreign ministers meeting is scheduled for February 2021 and the Leaders Summit for November 22-23. During his first term, Trump pushed for America's first policies strongly at G20, which led to both contestations and isolation on many issues. He was successful in altering in 2017 the emphasis of G20 from free trade to reciprocal trade, aligning with his views on international trade and his imminent trade war against China. With its more radical and aggressive agenda, it is not certain that Trump 2.0 will necessarily value the role of G20 and will work towards building relationships of cooperation and support within the grouping. In recent years, India has conveyed that groupings such as G20 may be more suitable than organizations such as UN for the solving complex global challenges. India's own pivot towards leadership of the Global South has benefited significantly from the rising status of G20 and from India's own position within the grouping in recent years. For India, the UNSC represents an outdated system based on the interest of victors of World War II. The G20, on the other hand, gave emerging economies a greater say in the matters of global governance. It was tailor made for a rising India. Given US objectives relating to the Russia Ukraine war and the rivalry with China, Biden White House has fully supported New Delhi's G20 presidency in 2023 and of its leadership of the Global South. This enabled India to present itself as a uniquely positioned consensus driving bridge between the Global South and the Global North, with relationship of trust on both sides. The policy priorities of Trump 2.0 appear markedly different from that of Biden administration. This is where the acrimony between the US and South Africa could have an unanticipated implications for the G20 in the worst case scenario of US either skipping G20 in South Africa or pulling out altogether, the grouping would be unquestionably weakened. More worryingly, it would come under greater Russo-Chinese sway and influence, but Rubio's tweet could also be an opening US salvo meant to prepare the ground for subsequent negotiations and compromises. In this scenario, South Africa would be expected to show more conciliatory approach in exchange for American goodwill. If so, the negative implications for both G20 and India's interest would be less serious. For India, there would be another concern: the Trump administration's ambivalence, if not antipathy, towards the global south could complicate India's global south related diplomacy. India's bridging power remains salient when US led West perceives the role favorably. But under the transactional leadership and administration, India's role and value as a leader of Global South may not necessarily be apparent to the White House. India's challenge will be to make the right choices as US, its strategic partner, locks horn with the traditional friends in the Global South with certain uncertain bargains and outcomes. India's repositioning on climate. India has argued that developing nations like itself should focus more on adaptation to tackle the climate crisis. It wants to decide the pace of energy transition on its own terms without moving away from decarbonization. In the last year or so, India has signaled a subtle but important shift in the way it views the climate crisis and how it wants to deal with it. The country has questioned the excessive preoccupation of the international climate regime to achieve a specific temperature goal and argued that for developing countries like itself, adaptation must take precedence over reducing emissions. India has also emphasized that rapid economic growth is the best defense against climate change for developing countries. Therefore, restrictions that constrain economic growth, such as curbs on the use of coal to generate electricity, are unacceptable. These arguments themselves are not new, however, they are being made emphatically with far greater clarity than before. This indicates an attempt by India to create space for greater flexibility in exercising its options on climate actions. It also provides the intellectual framework for the choices the country wants to make in this regard. Slow progress on mitigation. The shift in India's emphasis seemed to be prompted by reassessment in the ground realities. The world is nowhere close to meeting its emission reduction target for 2030. In the last year or so, India has signaled a subtle but important shift. Slow progress on migration. The shift in India's emphasis seems to be prompted by reassessment of the ground realities. The world is nowhere close to meeting its emission targets for 2030-2035 due to inaction largely on part of developed countries. Thus, there is thus very little incentive for a developed country like India to allocate resources for mitigation efforts. Appreciable benefits of mitigation accrue only when the world as a whole reduces emission by a significant amount. Also, these benefits are not witnessed immediately as global warming is not caused by the amount of greenhouse gas emissions being emitted, but by the concentration in the atmosphere over time. Adaptation, on the other hand, offers immediate and local benefits, building up building up rechange can be better utilization of limited resources. To a large extent, resilience is often a factor of prosperity. This is why India has argued that development is best shield against climate crisis. The Economic Survey 24-25, building up resilience against the impact of climate change can be better utilization of limited resources. To a large extent, resilience is often a factor of prosperity. This is why India has argued that development is the best shield against climate crisis. Economic survey released last week asserted that India must first strive to attain a developed country parameters by 2047 using available resources and only then focus on achieving the net zero goal by 2070. This is significant as it can liberate India from the dilemma of carrying out aggressive decarbonization while pursuing rapid economic growth. In a sense, the economic survey is recommending that India follow the Chinese example. China has unreservedly prioritized economic growth and industrialization without bothering about its emissions, which have grown 4 times from the mid 1990s. This was also when the international climate regime was established. The rapid economic growth has not just brought prosperity but also allowed China to build capabilities that will enable it to decarbonize faster than probably anyone else. The country now has the largest deployment of renewable energy and the biggest production and manufacturing base for the clean energy resources and technologies. Its emissions have still not peaked, however, once they do, possibly in the next couple of years, and China decides to start reducing emissions, it can shift to a cleaner source of energy much faster than any other country so far has managed to do. The recalibration of India's position comes at a time when the international attention on the climate action has tapered off a bit despite 23 and 24 settings back to back temperature records. Major events such as armed conflicts and technology wars have diverted the focus away from climate crisis. There has also been a growing frustration, especially among the developing countries, with the inability of international climate regime to deliver desired results. The meager financial package agreed to at the COP29 conference in Baku, Azerbaijan last year has eroded the trust of developing countries in this international process. They do not see their concerns being addressed adequately. Developed countries have not fulfilled their responsibilities on emissions reduction and have been extremely stingy in meeting their financial obligations as well. US President Donald Trump's immediate withdrawal from the Paris Agreement after assuming office in January 25 and decisions to produce more fossil fuels have brought a certain inevitability to the climate crisis going out of control. For India, this means less pressure on issues such as coal phase down. When countries with greater responsibilities, resources, and capabilities have made energy choices, irrespective of their impact on the climate crisis, India cannot be blamed for exercising similar options in its national interest. However, all this does not mean abandoning decarbonization altogether. India's economic growth would still have to happen on low carbon pathways, otherwise, there is a risk of being left out in the race to adopt clean energy and its related technologies. The pursuit of developed country parameters cannot be delinked from clean energy transition. The two would reinforce each other and have to happen simultaneously. Currently, India only seems to be asserting that the choices of low carbon development and the pace of energy transition should be decided by itself and not dictated by others. Well, that is a fair and reasonable ask. It is more on India than the rest of the world to make it happen. For example, if manufacturing and technology capabilities related to clean energy are not scaled up significantly, India will continue to remain dependent on foreign supply chains. The country would also not be in a position to make independent choices on energy transition. That is why the policy push to develop indigenous small modular reactors, for example, is so critical. India has been rather slow in ramping up its nuclear energy capacities. The Indo-US Civil Nuclear Deal and the special waiver at the Nuclear Suppliers Group should have enabled a rapid expansion of nuclear power sector. It did not happen for a variety of reasons. Now the SMRs offer fresh opportunity to do so. The recalibration comes at a time when the international attention on climate action has tapered off a bit. There has been growing frustration among developing countries The meager financial package agreed to at the COP29 conference at Baku, Azerbaijan last year, and US withdrawal from Paris Agreement. For India, this means less pressure on issues such as coal phase down. When countries with greater responsibilities, resources, and capabilities have made energy choices irrespective of their impact on climate crisis, India cannot be blamed for exercising similar options in its national interest. However, this does not mean abandoning decarbonization altogether. India's economic growth would still have to happen on low carbon pathways, otherwise, there is a risk of being left to adopt clean energy. Currently, India only seems to be asserting that choices of low carbon development and the pace of energy transition should be decided by itself and not dictated by others. While there is a fair and reasonable ask, it is more on India than the rest of the world to make this happen. For example, if manufacturing and technology capabilities related to clean energy are not scaled up significantly, India will continue to remain dependent on foreign supply chains. The country would also not be in a position to make independent choices on energy transition. A marine heat wave occurs when the surface temperatures of a particular region of a sea rises 3 to 4 degrees Celsius above the average temperature for at least 5 days. 3 to 4 degrees Celsius for the average temperature for at least 5 days. Marine heat waves can last for weeks, months, or even years, according to the US government agency National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA). National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. In the past few decades, marine heat waves have become longer lasting, more frequent and intense, according to a 2018 study published in the journal Nature. A 2021 report by the IUCN said marine heat waves had increased by 50% over the past decade, last longer, and were more severe now. A primary reason is the climate crisis as global temperatures soar to 1.3 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. 90% of the extra heat is being absorbed by the ocean. This has increased the global mean sea surface temperatures by close to zero point 0.9 degrees Celsius since then, with a rise of around 0.6 degrees Celsius over the last 4 decades, according to the Copernican Climate Change Service. This is why coastal Western Australia has been witnessing a spike in marine heat waves and their intensity. The situation will likely worsen across the world. The 2018 study said the current number of marine heat waves was projected to increase on average by a factor of 16 for global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius and by a factor of 23 for global warming of 2 degrees Celsius. Marine heat waves can be devastating for marine life. For example, the 2010-11 marine heat waves in Western Australia caused large-scale fish kills, the sudden and unexpected death of aquatic animals over the short period within an area. It also destroyed kelp forest that usually grows in cooler waters and provide habitat and food for marine animals. Instances of coral bleaching, which can make the corals more vulnerable to life threatening diseases, also heightened due to marine heat waves. Thousands of marine animals depend on coral reefs for survival, and damage to corals could in turn threaten their existence. But nuclear power is not the only one puzzle. Even if the ambitious target of 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2047 is met, it would form less than 10% of India's total electricity installed capacity. Even if the ambitious target of 100 gigawatt by nuclear energy by 2047 is met, it would form less than 10% of India's total electricity installed capacity. Every other clean energy option, solar, wind, and hydrogen, would need to be pursued aggressively over the next 2 decades for India to have succeed in its climate objectives. The marine heat waves linked to the death of more than 30,000 fish in the coastal Western Australia in January were made up to 100 times more probable due to climate change, a new analysis said. Marine heat waves began in September and are still ongoing in the region. The analysis was carried out by the non-profit Climate Central. It also said the severity of marine heat waves is intensifying as sea surface temperatures in some areas touch 2 degrees Celsius or more above average for this time of the year. The current marine heat waves are the second worst in Western Australia recorded in Australia's recorded history. The region saw its most intense marine heat waves during summer of 2010-11. Legacy of Aga Khan Fo, philanthropist and the leader of Nizari Ismailis. Prince Karim Al Husseini, who was the Aga Khan IV, died in Lisbon on Tuesday. He was 88. Considered to be a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad through his daughters Fatima and son-in-law Ali, Aga Khan is the Imam of the Nizari Ismaili Shias and holds near divine status among the community. Dweller 7 Fiver Shias. By the time Prophet's death in 632 CE, Islam had taken over much of Arabia. His demise sparked a battle of accession and split the community. Some argued that leadership should be awarded only to qualified individuals, while others insisted it be passed solely through Muhammad's bloodline. The former group went on to become the Sunnis, while the later became the Shias, the two main branches of Islam differing fundamentally on matters of doctrine, law, rituals, religious organizations. However, neither branch is a monolith. Among the Shias, for instance, there are three main denominations: dwellers, Ismailis, and Zaydis. All three trace through the descendant of Muhammad through a chain of imams or religious leaders, but they differ in the specifics of what line of descendant comprises. 12 Shias, the largest of the denomination, comprise 90% of total Shia population, followed by 12 divinely ordained imams, with the 12th Imam Muhammad al-Mahdi believed to be alive and in occultation. The Ismailis or Sevener Shias concur with the Dweller till the sixth Imam, and occur after which two lines split. The Zaydis or Fiver Shias split from the other lines after the first four Imams, Nizari Ismailis and the Aga Khan. Among the Ismailis, there are two subsects, Nizari Ismailis and the Daudi Bohras. The fundamental difference between the two communities is that Nizari trace the Prophet hereditary descent all the way to Aga Khans. The Daudi Bohras recognize direct descendant only till 18th Imam and follow today a line of Dais who are representatives of the concealed Imam. The title of Aga Khan was bestowed on Hassan Ali Shah, the 46th Imam of Nizari Islaili, by the Iranian king Fatah Ali Shah Khazar in the 19th century. Today, Nizar Ismailis are spread out across more than 30 countries. Although most trace their origin to Persia or the Indian subcontinent, they are not majority community in any location. Following a deal with the Portuguese government, the Aga Khan IV declared Lisbon as the global seat for the Nizari Emirate. Born in Geneva in 1936, Prince Karim was the eldest son of Prince Ali Khan and the grandson of Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah of Aga Khan III. After growing up in Nairobi and Switzerland, he went to Harvard to get a degree in Islamic history. Prince Karim's grandfather passed away in 1957. In his will, the Aga Khan III named his grandson as a successor, bypassing both his sons. He wrote, in view of the fundamentally altered conditions of the world, including the discoveries of atomic science, I am convinced that it is in best interest of the Nizari Ismaili community that I should be succeeded by a young man who have been brought up by developed during recent years and in the midst of the new age, and bring a modern outlook. Prince Karim did. The Imam of the atomic age, as some of the followers like to call him, became a transcendent figure. As British magazine Tatler wrote in its obituary, few people bridge so many divides between the spiritual and the material, East and the West, Muslim and Christian, as gracefully as he did. spiritual leader with taste. The Aga Khan was a man of who appreciated good things in life. He inhabited a world of luxury, super yachts, and private jets. Had a particular penchant for thoroughbred horses, and even owned a private island in the Bahamas. He moved with people from the highest echelons of society, and if not for his title, might have enjoyed global renown as a venture capitalist alone. He moved with Yet he was the spiritual leader of the flock and a man who helped Nizari Ismailis navigate crisis after crisis in the 20th and 21st centuries, from the end of the Cold War, the end of colonialism in Africa, and communism in Central Asia, and the continuous turmoil in the Middle East, where militant Sunnis brand the moderate Ismailis as apostates. Tatler's obituary said. An imam is not expected to withdraw from everyday life, the Aga Khan once told Vanity Fair. On the contrary, he is expected to protect his community and contribute to the quality of life. Aga Khan Development Network, the Aga Khan main philanthropic organization, deals primarily with healthcare, housing, education, and rural economic development. With an annual budget of more than $1 billion, it works in some 30 countries. The engagement of Imamat in developed development is guided by Islamic ethics, which bridge faith and society. It is on this premise that I established the Aga Khan Development Network, he said at a symposium in 2004. Among the prominent entities that are part of this network, and perhaps a reason why many in India and especially in Delhi are familiar with the Aga Khan's name, is the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. Seeking to impart a more informed understanding of the diverse cultures of the Muslim world, the Trust works to promote artists and musicians and renovate and refurbish important monuments and keep alive traditions of art and culture across the Islamic world. According to its website, the Trust's largest cultural project to date has been restoration and revitalization of the Humayun's tomb complex, including its gardens and in neighboring Nizamuddin area, along with rehabilitation of Sundar Nursery in Delhi. In Budget 25, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced unprecedented tax cuts for the middle class. To what extent will this help drive consumption and economic growth? Tax cuts will have multiplier effects. Increase in demand from urban middle class will encourage firms to commit to new projects. Budget 25 has effectively put an extra 1 lakh crore into the hands of India's urban middle class by cutting personal income tax. The question is, what will be the economic impact? Economists use the concept of consumption multiplier to estimate how extra disposable income can spark multiple rounds of spending and growth. In simple terms, when people have more money, they spend more. The shops and businesses that receive this money then pay their employees and suppliers who in turn spend more. The chain reaction can multiply the effect of the original amount many times over. The multiplier hinges on two ideas: the marginal propensity to save, which is the fraction of each additional rupee that people save, and marginal propensity to consume, which equals the fraction they spend, and tautologically equals 1 minus MPS. The consumption multiplier equals 1 upon 1 minus MPC, so 1 upon MPS. To estimate marginal propensity to save, we note that debt taken by households, which is included in the net savings rate but not in the gross savings rate, may be used primarily for asset creation. So, to know the proportion of 1 lakh crore that will be consumed, 1 minus gross savings rate for the urban middle class represents the best proxy. The gross national savings rate, which is averaged across all households, approximate 30% of the last for the last decade. This implies a marginal propensity to consume of 0.7 across all households. However, India's middle class has a higher marginal propensity to consume than wealthy households. The affluent may invest extra income in stocks and real estate, but middle income earners channel much of any of the windfall into day to day consumption, upgrading phones, buying household items, and spending on education or healthcare using the reasonable estimates of 20% as the marginal propensity to save. For the urban middle class households, we obtain consumption multiplier of 5. The 1 lakh crore tax foregone announced by the finance minister is a direct transfer into the middle class, and therefore 1 lakh crore increase in their disposable income. Using the consumption multiplier of 5, the personal income tax cut could generate up to 5 lakh crore in additional consumption this year. Usually, the multiplier is lower than posited by theory because people might save more if they suspect higher taxes later. The government borrowing rises, interest rates could climb, dampen private investment. If consumers buy a lot of foreign goods, the domestic impact drops. Uncertainty about jobs or the economy can push households to save for precautionary purposes. If firms cannot expand production, higher demand might mainly raise prices, not output to match the rising demand. Currently, urban middle class spending is lagging rural demand. The personal income tax cuts target this group precisely, which drives much of India's consumption of electronics, consumer durables, and entertainment. Many such goods and services are produced locally, so less money leaks abroad. With India's fiscal deficit under control and consumer confidence holding steady, urban middle class will feel comfortable spending now rather than hoarding cash. Tax cuts can sometimes crowd out private investment if the government must borrow more to offset the revenue lost. However, the personal income tax cut raises demand in the crucial urban middle class, thereby encouraging firms to commit to new projects. More hiring spurs higher incomes, boost f- further boosting consumer spending. Instead of crowding out, the well-targeted personal income tax cut is likely to crowd in private investment. Real consumption in India stand at 1 lakh crore, the real GDP at 185 lakh crore. Thus, 5 lakh crore increase leads to consumption growth of 4.8%, 5 divided by 104, and GDP growth of 2.7%, 5 divided by 185. Even with a more cautious multiplier of 3.3, assuming a marginal propensity to save of zero point 0.3 instead of zero point 0.2, the bump to consumption and GDP will be 3.2 and 1.8% respectively. Combined with the baseline forecast of 7.2% consumption growth and 6.3% GDP growth, the overall increase is likely to be 10% for the consumption and 8% for GDP. The RBI complement should complement this move by transitioning into easy monetary policy to enable private investment, which will stimulate output growth over several years. Despite the personal income tax cut, the central government has been fiscally sound, keeping the fiscal deficit at 4.4% in GDP. In fact, I had predicted last year following the budget the actual fiscal deficit will be lower than 4.4% of GDP this year too. So the RBI's policy stance must lean on fostering private investment and growth now. Some argue if tax cuts can create so much new spending, why bother capital outlays, capex? The key difference lies in duration. A tax cut is primarily near-term stimulus, and once absorbed this year, it does not yield fresh gains. In contrast, building roads, railways, and power infrastructure raises productivity for years, boosting long-term growth. The personal income tax cut offers a timely spark, but it does not replace the longer term benefits that arise from public investment. So I do not anticipate this as a change away from the Union government's economic policy of growth through a virtuous cycle triggered by investment. Only a few will benefit. Fall in real earnings of majority cannot be compensated by concessions. Most don't earn enough to be amongst the taxpayers. There has been a massive build-up to do something to please the middle class in 25-26 budget, particularly the urban salary tax paying middle class. Not coincidentally, this has been one of the talking points in the Delhi Assembly elections. The government has announced setting up of 8th Central Pay Commission, raising expectations of higher pay and allowances for central and state government employees. The Unified Pension Scheme, guaranteeing a pension equivalent of to 50% of the last year's pay and dearness allowance thereon, notified on Jan 25. In the latest budget, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman did one better. Say again. The government has announced the setting up of a 8th Central Pay Commission, raising expectations of higher pay and allowances for central and state government employees. The Unified Pension Scheme, guaranteeing pension equivalent to 50 years of last year's pay and dearness allowance thereon, was notified on Jan 25. In the latest budget, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman did one better. She made income taxes up to 12 lakh per annum income tax free, and incomes up to 24 lakh subject to lower tax rate for all SECs filing returns. This would mean foregoing income tax receipts of 1 lakh crore. Are these concessions good enough to woost India's middle class? Will this succeed in turning around India's wobbly consumption growth story? India's personal income tax structure has two big pain points. One, the tax exemption threshold of 2.5 lakh under the old scheme, 3 lakh under the new scheme was awfully low. Second, the maximum tax rate slab of 30% kicked in at only say 10 lakh under the old scheme, 15 lakh under the new scheme. This resulted in an excruciating income tax burden on the taxpayer. Sitharaman took out both the pain points. The minimum threshold has been raised to 4 lakh and 30% rate slab now kicks at 24 lakh only. This much needed tax reform, as claimed by the finance minister, reduces the tax burden of taxpayers with income between 8 lakh to 24 lakh and above by 10,000 to 1.10 lakh a year. On top of it, the finance minister completely exempted taxpayers with total income of less than 12 lakh by granting rebate for the tax payable. Such taxpayers will have rebate benefits of 20,000 to 60,000. The combined benefits of tax slab and rebate are claimed to range between 30,000 and to 1.1 lakh. So far, so good. And the important associated questions: what will be the actual benefit against what is claimed, and how many people in the middle class bracket are likely to benefit? The new slabs, rates, rebates are applicable only under the new regime. Anyone who gets assessed under the new scheme does not get the benefit of many concessions and exemptions like the interest paid on housing loans, allowed on deduction from rental income or loss, medical insurance payments, premium, etc. Therefore, only those taxpayers who claim concessions less than reduced income tax liability will shift to the new tax regime. Of about 3 crore income tax assessees who are currently of the old regime, not more than 50 lakh are likely to benefit from the tax bonanza announced. The extent of their benefit will also depend on the concessions deductions they would be foregoing. The finance minister's claim of sacrificing 1 lakh crore offering income tax concessions is also highly exaggerated. This is evidenced by the fact that personal income taxes are estimated to yield the government 14 lakh crore in revenue in 25-26, which is 21% higher than the 24-25 budget estimate, against estimated growth of 11% for gross tax revenue. Such high growth cannot happen when the government is making sacrifices. Moreover, by not making new tax slabs applicable to the SSEs under the old regime, Finance Minister did a great disservice to the 2.5 to 3 crore middle class taxpayers. 50 lakh income taxpayers likely to benefit from relief provided in the budget do not make up India's middle class, nor is the claim tax relief of 1 lakh crore actual impact may not be more than 25,000 crore, enough to significantly add to the private final consumption expenditure of 200 lakh crore in 24-25. 50 lakh income taxpayer likely to benefit from the relief provided in the budget do not make up for the India's middle class, nor is the claimed tax relief of 1 lakh crore actual impact may not be more than 25,000 crore, enough to significantly add to the private financial consumption expenditure of 200 lakh crore. Real consumption driver is real income of the people. Story is pretty bad there. Economic survey presents trend in real earnings of India's labor class. Real earnings of regular wages salaried workers between 17-18 to 23-24 has reduced from 12,000 to 8,000, and for women 10,000 to 8,800. In the case of self-employed workers, it has declined from 9,400 to 8,500, and for women from 4,300 to 2,900. Unfortunate for the unfortunate women self-employed workers, even the nominal earnings declined from 5,900 to 5,400. Regular wage salaried earning workers constitute approximately 20% of the 65 crore strong workers and about 12 to 13 crore workers. Their declining real incomes cannot be compensated by income tax concessions for the simple reason that most of them don't earn enough to be among the taxpayers. Certainly, the urban, higher income middle class taxpayers would feel better with the income tax concessions announced. That, however, is only a small fraction of the India's middle class. For vast majority of Indian people, these concessions would have no impact on their consumption standards. The centers we see. The requirement of 2.2 million Palestinians to be forcefully resettled in neighboring Arab states amounts to unambiguous endorsement of a criminal atrocity, ethnic cleansing, The Guardian. Trump on Gaza. This refers to editorial Protect the Ceasefire, Trump's proposal to run counter to the US public opinion, which polls shown is overwhelmingly opposed to now new entanglements in conflict zones following the lengthy intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some experts say this proposed action could violate international law. Others describe his idea as unworkable. Human rights advocates say if it would amount to ethnic cleansing, any forced displacement of Palestinian population of Gaza would constitute serious violation of international law and would be an attack on legitimate aspirations of the Palestinians as well as a major obstacle to the two-state solution. This refers to the report. It seems they have hot food for ages. Many felt betrayed by agents. The use of handcuffs and shackles during the deportation is not an action of a civilized nation. That said, it is difficult to equate the cause of those who knowingly use illegal means to immigrate stemming from the sense of relative deprivation to those who flee from conflict or disaster zones. Hence, India should exercise caution in its response to deportation as escalating tensions could negatively impact its overall relationship with the US and particularly the interest of skilled Indian professionals residing there. This refers to editorial The Idea of Delhi. The question is whether in public perception the app has lived up to the promise of an alternative politics based on transparency and accountability. App triumphed over the BJP in two consecutive elections and evolved the Delhi model of governance, privileging education and healthcare in the budget and heavily subsidizing utilities for the common citizen as a counter to the development oriented Gujarat model. Now battered by changes of corruption and abuse of public fund, AAP's very survival is at stake, win or lose. AAP would do well to recall the principles on which it was founded. Narendra Modi government never misses a chance to condemn the emergency as a dark chapter in India's democracy, but it continues to rely on contentious legislation framed during that era, notably the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976, which shifted education from the state list to the concurrent list, the newly proposed UGC minimum qualifications for appointment and promotions of teachers and academic staff in university and colleges, and measurement of maintenance of standards of higher education regulations 2025 have sparked a debate, especially regarding the appointment of vice chancellors. Proposed challenges threaten the Proposed challenges threaten federal principles, erode states' authority in higher education, and pave the way for excessive centralization. The draft regulations propose sweeping overhaul of the VC appointment process for state universities, giving chancellors, in most cases the governors, the right to constitute search and selection committees. This marks a stark departure from the existing framework, wherein state governments play a pivotal role in the selection process. Under the draft committee will comprise three members, one nominee from the Chancellor Visitor, UGC Chairman, and University Second Syndicate or Senate. The committee will recommend a panel of 3 to 5 candidates, from which Chancellor or Visitor with sole discretion will make the final appointment. It removes the requirement of VCs to have prior teaching or research experience, raising fears of politicization. The origins of governor's role as Chancellor of universities can be traced to Wood's Dispatch of 1854, which recommended that university chancellors be persons of high station with an interest in the cause of education. Post independence, governors retained this thanks to the political milieu where the state single party held sway at national and state levels. However, the rise of multi party politics created tensions. The in- inability of elected state governments to effectively supervise their universities had led to myriad administrative challenges. Complications arise when governor or chancellor diverges from advice of council of ministers. Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer in the landmark Maruram versus Union of India 1980 characterized by officials by the president and governors as a functional euphemisms. Unfortunately, governors have been resisting such constraints and sometimes acting in ways that contradict the state executive. Justice R.S. Sarkaria Commission acknowledged criticism regarding the discretionary authority exercised by some governors in their capacity as chancellors. The Commission on Center-State Relations, however, took an unequivocal stance on the matter. In its report of March 2010, it underscored the risk of governors serving as chancellors and assuming other statutory positions. Several states have sought to curtail the governor's role in university governance through legislative amendments, but these attempts have had varying degrees of success. A striking illustration lies in the governor's assent to the Gujarat University Laws Amendment Bill 2013, which effectively divested the governor of chancellorship powers. It was Narendra Modi as chief minister who brought in the legislation, and the NDA government was instrumental in granting the assent. In contrast, similar moves by Kerala and other opposition ruled states have been obstructed, with governors either withholding assent or referring such bills to the parliament. The writer attempted to introduce a private member's bill in Rajya Sabha in July 24, Constitution Amendment Bill 24, Amendment of Article 158. It sought to restrict governors' role strictly to constitutional functions, preventing them from assuming extra constitutional functions such as chancellorships. It was denied introduction due to numerical majority of the ruling coalition. Recent Supreme Court judgments have conferred primacy to UGC regulations over the state university laws, igniting fervent Debates on the constitutional relationship between central government vis-a-vis state laws. At the heart of the discourse lies the concept of subordinate legislation, delegated legislation, a progeny of executive fiat, which refers to rules, regulation, orders promulgated by authorities, executive authorities under the powers conferred by them, and an act of parliament or state legislature. Granting primacy to legislated delegated legislation like UGC regulations over state enactments impinges upon federalism. While state law are crafted for elected representatives, delegated legislation originates from executive bodies. The draft regulations also seeks to institutionalize contractualize contractual employment in higher education by removing the 10% cap, accelerating the contractualization of teaching positions. They also permit higher education institutions to industry recruit up to 10% professionals from industry and non-academic fields such as professors of practice, fostering corporate influence in academia while creating a fragmented faculty structure. The trend mirrors ad hoc recruitment policies such as Agniveers in military and lateral entry in civil services, undermining social justice. What is the center's true contribution to education sector? Even in crucial schemes such as UGC grants for teachers, it has progressively shifted the burden onto state governments. Today, states bear nearly 76% of total expenditure on education. Draft regulations are an affront to federalism. The legislative assemblies of Kerala and Tamil Nadu have already passed resolutions calling for a withdrawal. Other states will likely follow suit at a time when India aspires to position itself as a global leader in education and research. Draft regulations emphasis on central control threatens to homogenize education, eroding diversity and stifling innovation at the state level. India's federal structure, in its cornerstone enabling both unity and diversity, it is imperative for all stakeholders to oppose measures that threaten this delicate balance. The other Pravasi, marginalized at home, deported from the US. Why some Indians undergo hardship of illegal migration. In their address on Pravasi Bharati Divas, the day that commemorates Mahatma Gandhi's return to India from South Africa in 1915, successive prime ministers have said to gathered audience of people of Indian origin, PIOs, overseas and non-resident Indians, NRIs, that they are Mother India's ambassadors. They represent Indian culture and civilization, talent and enterprise. Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Pravasi Bharatiya gathering in Bhubaneswar last month, uh, that overseas Indians are Bharat's Rashtradoot. Indian immigrants who have been charged with entering the United States illegally and have been forced to return home, transported in US military craft, are ambassadors of a different kind. They remind the world of not of Indian talent and enterprise, culture or civilization, but lack of opportunity, of discrimination of one kind or other, and of unease of living here that makes them undergo the hardship of illegal migration. The leadership of the national movement took a dim view of the enforced export of Indian labor to European colonies, both due to their concern for human rights and individual freedom, as well as their view that the plight of poorly paid Indian labor overseas was a blot on the face of Mother India. Under pressure from the national leadership, the government of British India represented to the imperial government in London whatever may be the extent of economic advantage arising from the immigration of indentured labor. Political aspect of the question is such that no one who has the heart of the interest for British rule in India can afford to neglect it. For Indian politicians, moderate and extreme alike, consider that existence of the system which they do not hesitate to call by the name of slavery, brand their whole race in the eyes of British colonial empire with the stigma of helotry. The status of today's illegal immigrants is in many respects no different from that of the indentured labor of the 19th and 20th centuries. The latter's great grandchildren may now be feted India as overseas representatives of Bharat Mata, but there are many children of Bharat Mata today who emigrate illegally for reasons not very different from the ones that forced the poor of British India to be coerced into slavery. Legal migrants are welcomed as fodder that fuels the development engines of developed economies. They are welcomed because they bring with them either human or financial capital. Illegal immigrants have only their wage labor to offer. Both have the capacity to contribute to the host economy, and both can potentially snatch away jobs from locals. Yet, developed countries treat the legal and illegal very differently. Demographies play a role, so social attitudes. Illegal migrants are viewed as a contempt with contempt both in host and home countries. In the former, because they are not viewed as an asset but as a liability. In the latter, they are viewed as an object of shame because they represent the underside of nation's development. Media's focus is at the moment on number of illegal migrants identified by US and numbers being deported. Over the past 5 COVID years, US Customs and Border Agency has detained as many 1,70,000 Indian migrants attempting to US illegally. Interestingly, a large portion of such illegal migrants are reportedly from more developed states such as Gujarat and Punjab. In both states, the sizable presence of overseas Gujaratis and Punjabis is one factor that contributes to the temptation to immigrate and hope of eventual success if they make it networking through kinship links. However, it is also a fact of that lack of adequate opportunities even in developed states has also contributed to the desperation of illegal immigrants. The news of enforced return of illegal migrants into a sharp relief the dualism that characterizes Indian immigration. India's talented and wealthy are welcomed across the world and they are happy to leave home. India's depressed and desperate are, however, increasingly shunned. Donald Trump too makes this distinction. He has said that he would like to keep America's door open to India's talented while shutting them to India's desperate. If on the one hand the desperate are trying to immigrate illegally, on the other hand an increasing number of wealthy are also leaving Indian shores in search of first world lives. Henley and Partners, a firm that describes itself as a firm of global citizens that assist clients to acquire foreign citizenship and residents through investment, reports that 6,500 wealthy Indians opted for paid immigration in 2022 and 4,300 in 2024. Several developed economies are offering citizenship at a price, and at a increasing number of Indians are willing to pay that price. Replying to a question in Parliament in August 24, Minister of State for External Affairs Kirti Vardhan Singh stated that a total of 2,25,000 Indians had renounced their Indian citizenship in 2022 and 2,16,000 in 2023. Taken together, a total of 18 lakh Indians had given up citizenship in period of 2011-23. In the end, cross-border migration is a natural phenomena made illegally only in 20th century. Humans have moved through time in search of livelihood and opportunity. A large part of white American population comprises Europe's poor and desperate and not the European elites. European elite migrated into the US in the 20th century phenomena that began in the interwar period and increased after that. The shiploads that crossed the Atlantic were Europe's marginalized and desperate. The America that was open to such people seeking a better and freer life is now shutting its door to the world's marginalized. On returning home, how will these illegal migrants view the society that they left in desperation? What does life have in store for those who have been to the land of opportunity and then forced to return to a place that offered little opportunity? How will we respond to and reintegrate those who have been deported and sent back? The PIO and NRI, the Rishi Sunak, Satya Nadellas, and Ajay Bangas are received back home with much pride and fanfare. How will we receive other Pravasis? In Parliament, PM Modi underscored political battle lines that will span a year in which there will be a lull in electoral hostilities. Over 6 months in its third term, with the immediate aftermath of Union budget, that is seen to be focused easing the strain on tax-paying middle class, Prime Minister Narendra Modi framed two broad themes. In his reply to the motion of thanks, Lok Sabha, PM Modi sought to connect the dots from India's poor to tomorrow's middle class, where the new middle class, and said that they energize the India's growth story. He described the many ways in which his government has empowered the poor. 25 crore have been lifted out of poverty in his tenure, and spoke of how SC, STs and Vanchit Samudaya or deprived sections were being given a leg to become stakeholders in Viksit Bharat through targeted programs and schemes. In his other words, politically decoded, his message was, don't look at the tax break. A shift from the government's pro-poor focus was an extension of it. The second political message that could be read in lines and between them was that BJP still sees Congress as a major political opponent to be vanquished and defines itself in opposition to. That is worth noting because on ground the strongest challenge to the Modi BJP's dominance comes from regional parties. A different one in every state, not Congress. Despite the upward blip on the Lok Sabha scoreboard in June 24, Congress has been unable to reverse the impression of an unchecked dwindling. That impression is also being increasingly weaponized against its India allies, who are one after the another questioning its claim within the opposition to primacy. PM Modi sketched several before and after scenarios. In each, Congress was discredited Ankian regime. While in the Lok Sabha speech he targeted the AP2 without taking its name, in the Rajya Sabha speech made a day after the voting in Delhi, he painted his own party and government as the anti-Congress. The Congress looks at the family first, he said. Well, it is a nation first for the BJP. Congress worldview is pessimistic. दूसरे की लकीर को छोटा करना, an attempt to self-aggrandize the zero-sum game, while the BJP believes in Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, progress of all. Congress is divisive on caste, promotes Jativad ka zahar, the poison of casteism. Its rhetoric marks in its disrespect to Ambedkar, it is the party that presided over license Raj and clamped down on freedom of by imposing emergency. In recent time, Congress has sought to mount the social justice plan by making the demand for caste census central to manifesto, by pointing preferably to three MPs in one family, and with his rhetorical question on whether this would be possible if the family were SC or ST. PM Modi was attempting to undercut that Congress claim and strategy. His speeches underscores the battle lines that will span in a year in which they will otherwise belong lull in hostilities between election in Delhi now and Bihar at the year end. Principles of data governance in UPI ecosystem should be adhered to. A payment architecture that is ubiquitous, costless to the user, reliable and used by millions. UPI is one of the India's defining contributions to the 21st century. It has allowed India to bypass the dominance of card network and move to digital payment ahead by decades. Here is argue policy discourse on the problems created by duopoly like structure in the third party app providers such as Google Pay and PhonePe, and how the attempts to reduce market share below 30% is misplaced. The imposition of arbitrary market share cap to mimic a competitive outcome is counterproductive. These markets tend to become concentrated due to positive network externalities. There are other issues around UPI that need to be addressed. The biggest is personal data protection. UPI shares significantly more data on digital spending habits of consumers than traditional forms of transactions such as credit cards. Also, UPI does not have any storage standards, unlike traditional payment systems, which have strict standards such as payment card industry data security standards. Finally, the data sharing policies of TPAPs are not publicly available. Third-party app providers. Third-party app providers are not publicly available, limiting awareness of the data implications of the UPI ecosystem. The situation of maximal data collection and minimal standards is exacerbated by the number of parties involved in the UPI transaction, increasing the possibility of data leaks. Privacy experts argue that the UPI ecosystem is able to sustain without fees simply by virtue of being premised on data collection and data sharing. This means that if you're not paying, you are the product, while data collection is in UPI is and nor Orwellian as the behavioral data collection monetization by social media firms. There are parallels and perhaps lessons to be learned. The true cost of UPI duopoly is that extracted data is entrenching the market position of data-rich third-party app providers. Data leveraging by third-party app providers into adjacent markets may limit contestability in broader financial products market, including insurance and microloans. While business models based on data extraction are clearly cause for concerns, artificial market share caps would not address this problem. This discussion becomes crucial in the context of recent Digital Personal Data Protection Rules 25. Third-party app providers could fall within the ambit of significant data fiduciaries and defined in the draft. The draft regulations emphasized the principle of data minimization, which specifies that only data necessary for fulfilling the purpose for which consent has been obtained must be collected when applied to the UPI ecosystem. This would entail determining the least amount of information which UPI services can be rendered efficiently, safely, and reliably, while the minimal data required can be freely shared among ecosystem participants. Any further collection of user information should be based on informed, unambiguous, and specific consent. These pro-competitive principles of data minimization and purpose limitation can mitigate harms of data accumulation by large firms. It is important to note that Rule 5, Clause 1 of the draft DPDP Rules 25 permits the state and its instrumentalities to process personal data for data principle for provisioning of insurance of subsidies, benefits, issuance of subsidies, benefit services. UPI would likely fall within the scope of exemption to state instrumentalities. However, such exemption should not be limited to core infrastructure operated by NPCI. Third-party app providers who are private operators riding on the rails of digital public infrastructure need not be given such exemptions. The draft DPDP rules are enacted and applied in considered manner to the UPI ecosystem. It has the potential to create high degree of transparency and protection of personal data, which can maintain and grow public trust in UPI and address the competition issues. The joint communique by the G20 Troika on DPI, AI, and data for governance also calls for reducing asymmetries in digital economies, emphasizing establishment of equitable principles of data governance to ensure privacy and security. Perhaps it is time for India to blaze the trail further in financial digital public infrastructure and consolidate its position in vanguard of innovation and financial inclusion by implementing these data governance principles. Sea of opportunities by embracing and supporting athletic excellence, IIT Madras sets a precedent of more inclusive definition of achievement. The Sports Excellence Admission Scheme of IIT Madras marks a transformative step launched in July-August 24 with an investment of around 25 crore and operational only in the Madras campus. 34 supernumerary seats are reserved for athletes who have won at least one medal in the national or international event in a sports recognized by federations under the Union Sport Ministry in the last 4 years, scored at least 75% and cleared the JEE Advanced test. It rewards athletic powers with infrastructural support as well as opportunity to pursue higher education at one of the India's country's most coveted institutions. In India, there are traditionally been disconnect between academic dreams and athletic ambitions with focus largely being on the former. But sports require a unique set of skills, discipline, perseverance, teamwork, and leadership that can be equally invaluable in the world of innovation and technology. Providing athletes with specialized support offers them a chance to excel in their chosen sport and academic career. This can offer a more diverse and rounded educational environment where success is not solely defined by the ability to excel in a single domain but by a broader range of skills. These changes are also aligned with global trend of holistic education. By embracing and supporting athletic excellence. IIT Madras sets a precedent for other educational institutions across the country towards a more inclusive definition of achievement. The fact that origin of the scheme lies in tragedy, a series of students' suicides on campuses between September 22 and 23, also points the larger malaise affecting higher education in India. Where the barriers has too many, the opportunities too few, the stakes impossibly high. In recent years, IITs have consciously tried to address the lack of diversity, both in terms of gender and socio-economic backgrounds. Though through implementation of supernumerary quota of 20% for women in undergraduate engineering programs on open door policy for aspirants to interact with faculty members, correction. Creating a culture of inclusivity and support will allow for better integration of diverse communities for these institutions and help dismantle stereotypes of a homogeneous masculine STEMS ecosystem. However, it is essential that these measures are complemented with other reforms, including mentorship, financial assistance for the marginalized, and counseling services. A diverse IIT campus will encourage creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking, the foundation upon which India's technological future should be built. Thank God it's Monday. A new study suggests that evenings and weekends are the happiest times. There was never a night or a problem that could defeat sunrise or hope. Bernard Williams. Tax evasion notices to Volkswagen Kia for misclassifying imported parts. Gold rush, soaring prices drives consumers to pledge their assets. New income tax bill to not add to tax burden. Boeing deliveries to Indian carriers may average to a month in 24-25. 2,800 jets could be added in the next 20 years. Customers Air India Group and fledgling airline Akasa will be two planes a month on average over 24-25 period. US aerospace giant has grappled with various headwinds including regulatory action, action amid safety concerns. Labour Ministry formulating transaction-based pension policy for gig workers. Transaction-based pension policy for gig workers. New RBI governor to announce MPC decision on Friday. EPFO settles a record 5-year claims so far in FY25. Bank of England cuts key policy rate by 25% to 4.5%. Government to develop 1,600 centers to train good drivers, reduce accidents. Driver training institutes across the country. Vice Captain Cool, Shubman Gill shepherds India's chase and debutant Harshat Rana takes 3 wickets as India wins first ODI. When Virat Kohli pulled out a first ODI against England due to sore knee in the morning of the game, it was thought that Yashasvi Jaiswal was the one who replaced him, but Shreyas Iyer revealed at the end of the game that he wouldn't have played had Kohli been fit. Surprise move reveals India's mood ahead of the Champions Trophy, and particular the head coach Gambhir's preference to have left-right combination in the batting lineup. As you all know, I wasn't supposed to play today. Virat unfortunately got injured, and then I got the opportunity. I kept myself prepared. When what Trump's transgender policy means, It would become near impossible for transgender athletes to forge a career in the country. LA Games participation could take a hit. Trump, Israel will hand over Gaza, US troops not required on ground. US President Donald Trump said Israel would hand over Gaza to the United States after fighting was over. An enclave's population was already resettled elsewhere, which he said meant no US troops would be needed on ground, a day after worldwide condemnation of Trump's announcement that he aimed to take over and develop Gaza Strip into a Riviera of Middle East. Israel ordered its army to prepare to allow the voluntary departure of Gaza's residents. Bring God back, Trump says he wants to root out anti-Christian bias. I thought we voted for America's first. Palestinians walked past the rubble of buildings in Gaza on Thursday. PM Sharif's son Hamza let off in corruption case. A Pakistani court on Thursday acquitted Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and his son Hamza Shehbaz in an 8-year old corruption case. Anti-corruption court Judge Sardar Muhammad Iqbal announced the verdict, which was reserved on Monday. Anti-corruption court of Lahore today acquitted Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Trump, who had previously declined to rule out deploying US troops to Gaza, clarified his plans in comments on his Truth Social web platform. Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. He said Palestinians would have already been resettled in far safer and beautiful countries. President Donald Trump said on Thursday that he wants to root out anti-Christian bias in the US, announcing that he was forming a task force led by Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate targeting of Christians. Speaking out at pair of events in Washington surrounding the National Prayers Breakfast, Trump said task force would be directed to immediately halt all forms of anti-Christian targeting. Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. Palestinians would have already been resettled in far safer and more beautiful communities with new and modern homes in the region. Sea was once a blessing for Pakistani city of Gwadar. Now it has become a curse. The city, built on sand dunes, is vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Gwadar is in Balochistan, an arid, mountainous and vast province in Pakistan's southwest that searing summers and harsh winter that has searing summers and harsh winters. The city, with about 90,000 people, is built on sand dunes and bordered by the Arabian Sea on three sides. At low elevation, that makes it vulnerable to climate change. It's no less than an island nation. Its situation, warned Gwadar-based hydrologist Fazir Ahmed. Iran. Trump's plan follows Israeli scheme to wipe out Palestinian. Iran's first drone carrier ship, which it says is carrying out operations in oceans far from its mainland. Muzo says Maldives to prioritize neighbors. The sovereignty of Maldives is the highest priority for the country's history. Ukraine attempts offensive in Western Kirk's Russia. Engaging with US to ensure deportees are not ill-treated, Jaishankar in-house, new middle class emerged out of poverty, powering development. Why didn't the government send own aircraft? Opposition raises inhuman treatment. Dhaka mob torches home for Asina father, Delhi slams vandalism. Assault on press, High Court pulls up SIT and seizure on journalist phones. Tennis to water polo common ground under the IIT Madras sports quota. 1300 year-wise deputations. 2019 2000 year-wise deputations. High Court steps in to decide who will manage the airport zone waste MCD or Delhi International Airport Limited. Lok Sabha adjourned for the day amid opposition protest over deputation issue. In Rajya Sabha, Devgowda says Naidu wants to be the NDA vice chairman. No such discussion, clarifies Nadda. With his younger son's wedding scheduled this month, Union Agricultural Minister has been travelling frequently between Delhi and Bhopal. He was in Bhopal for pre-wedding Lagna ceremony and Satyanarayan Puja. Despite his engagement, Chauhan it is learned managed to conduct two separate video conferences to receive briefings on parliamentary questions as he is expected to reply in Lok Sabha on Friday. Nuclear energy will grow with private sector entry just like space did. Chandrayaan-4 launched in 27, Samudrayaan in 26 to explore seabed. In Kerala, IUML CM's pitch for 26 polls set off UDF Chan worries Congress. Odisha joins Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Gujarat to seek 50% in share in central taxes. Himachal police closes gang rape case complaint against Badoli. Haryana police books complainant. Disregard for Kashmiri lives, leaders after truck driver killed in army firing during chase. Demchok now open to visitors under Battlefield Tourism Initiative. Battlefield Tourism Initiative. Mirage crashes in MP. Mirage 2000 fighter jet of the Indian Air Force in Madhya Pradesh Shivpuri district. Court asked Maharashtra minister to pay maintenance in domestic violence case. Registration under Uttarakhand UCC solely to preserve demography. Drafting panel member. Multiple names, WhatsApp calls, no receipt for money paid. How donkey route travel agents function. So that's all for today. See you in the next one.